What is good, YouTube? My name is Velikan. In this video, we will be taking a look at combat masteries. So let's dive straight into things. There is a lot on your screen right now, and I kind of expect you to have seen this picture before, and I kind of expect you to at least have a general idea of what is being presented on your screen. I will not be covering everything, but let's go over the basics really quickly. You get 10 combat mastery points. One of the combat mastery points includes killing Zuck in the Inferno. So some of you watching this might only gain 9 combat mastery points. Generally, I would say you are going 6-4 or 5-5. So 6 in one tier, 4 in another, or 5 in 2 tiers. Another thing that's really interesting is the tier 3 ranged relic, or mastery, I should be saying. This allows you to get a one-tick blowpipe, which is extremely strong for off-styles, specifically when you want to go the Drygore blowpipe from the desert, because it's more accurate than the other one. The passive tier 6 breaks through prayer protection. That is really strong in specific areas, but maybe not necessarily in all areas, so that's something to consider. Then there is the magic tier 2, which increases your max hit when you're not attacking. I think this works when you're swapping to a off-style. So let's say you're a magic user and you swap to a blowpipe, you heal up a bit with a tier 4 ranged relic, then you swap back to, let's say, your Tumakin, and then you can blast your enemy for a plus 40% damage Tumakin attack. Might be nice. I don't know if it works exactly that way, but we'll see. And then tier 6 magic is something to consider. It functions as a execute mechanic. However, if damage is calculated the second your projectile leaves your magic weapon, it might not be that strong. So you kind of expect to execute a lot of mobs that way, but at the same time, you can get up to like 3 or 4 projectiles up in the air before the first one hits. If the enemy has higher HP than your max hit, and your damage is already calculated, you might not be executing the target. So it might be a little bit awkward to play around with. Regardless, this is still up to like a 10% DPS increase. So if you want a main hand mage, you still want to go tier 6 magic anyway, but it's something to keep in mind. Some disclaimers. It's pretty damn difficult to get everything right by myself. I'm just one guy. Yes, I am scouring League's Discord. Yes, I am scouring Reddit. Yes, I am scouring Twitter. I am talking about leagues to some of my friends, but all in all, I'm just one guy, and it's pretty damn difficult to be exhaustive in these videos. So I am somewhere in between, like considering all of the options in all edge cases and prematurely sharing what I have. And I'm kind of leaning towards just sharing what I think and what I have. So you can either add and or critique whatever I'm saying, and we can get better information together. Right, so that's part of why I'm doing these videos. That said, I really do want to be as exhaustive as possible, because just giving you some general overviews, yeah, you can go either 6 points into magic or melee or ranged, and you'll be fine. There's no use for you if you're watching a video like that. So I try to really consider all options in my videos. That's probably why I think, at least, why you like them. So let's try and do that in this video as well. I am fairly certain that we will be getting more combat relics. There is nothing like Undying Retribution or Guardian in the Masteries. I'm kind of expecting Jagex to release another combat relic tier. If that's the case, that perhaps invalidates any and or all information in this video, so keep that in mind. We do not know everything right now. If the information in this video turns out to be partly or mostly incorrect, I will be doing a new one later. So what are my first impressions of the combat masteries? Zuck is a combat mastery point. You might end up with only 9 points. 6-3 is fine, so don't get too worked up over this, right? 6-3 is perfectly fine. Also, Soul Heredit in Varlamore is supposed to be some super elite Grandmaster tier Echo boss. You might not be able to kill him if you're not that good at PvM. So you might end up with only 8 mastery points. 6-2 is still fine. You're still going to be having a lot of fun, but still, keep that in mind. It's very important. A couple of obvious things. Of course, you can go 6-4 or 5-5. I don't see any value in 3-3-4 in any order. There might be some value in 1-6-3 in any order. I'm not going to be covering those. I think they're too niche. I don't see exactly how they perfectly swap into specific types of content, or slot into specific types of content, I should say. So 163, I think some people are going to do that, but I don't know about it. The tier 6 passive doesn't seem too crazy initially. However, it is exceptionally useful in Tombs of a Masked because you can blast through Akka and Warden's P2. It's also useful in Gauntlet against the Hunlef. There's probably some other areas as well. I could not find a list of bosses on the wiki that prey overheads, but generally, of course, if you're in an area that has bosses with overheads, this is going to be very strong. I also think that echo bosses are going to have overheads. So tier 6 passive is probably strong because of the echo bosses alone. I already talked about this. 163 might have some uses on certain bosses that are immune to your styles, but generally going 6-4 is an option too, I think. But let's say you want to like 163 in Zaya, you know, you might use the one for Tekton or something like that, and then you can like range most of the things. And I don't think there's anything ranged immune in Chambers or in Zaya for that matter. But maybe you want to use some magic attacks for another boss. I don't know. Either way, the tier 6 passive is kind of awkward because it breaks your hybrid and tribrid approaches. But there are some bosses that are playing horrible with your style. Tekton, for instance, is 100% ranged and magic immune. I'm not sure if the tier 6 range relic is going to pierce through that because it supposedly never misses. But there are some enemies in the game that are just straight up immune, and not because of overheads either. So the tier 6 passive might not fix every damn encounter in the game, but still. So it's I don't know. I just don't know. Consider your options, consider your regions, consider the bosses in those regions, and you should be able to come up with something yourself. Let's start with melee. Melee. The tier 6 sounds strong and fun, but 20% isn't insane, and the chance of hitting it 8 times in a row is incredibly low. So it's like 0.02%, which is like 2 in 10,000. You might see it once or twice throughout the leagues, but I don't think you're going to see it often. That said, you are going to hit like 2, 3, 4s in a row quite often, or at least relatively often. I checked the OSRS wiki DPS calc because it was up earlier than the Gearscape calc. It clocks the melee tier 6 relic in at a plus 7.5 DPS increase. So not insignificant at least, but not too crazy either. Either way, you can opt to ditch the melee tier 6 in favor of the tier 5 for either range or mage. This might be interesting to you because some content is not meleeable. So whatever you do, I would seriously consider adding range or mage to a melee build, right? Even if it's only for Inferno. So whether you do like melee tier 6, range tier 4, or melee tier 5, range tier 5, or mage tier 5, like seriously consider it. And when I say consider, I also mean like changing your areas for that. Because if you're not doing, let's say you do melee tier 6 with a range tier 4, you're not going blowpipe, what are you using? Rune crossbow? Maybe. It's not bad, but be aware of what items you have available to you, right? Then there has been some confusion about the scythe. The tier 6 relic or mastery for melee rolls off of hit splats, but the scythe still calcs at a plus 7.5 DPS. So the scythe apparently has 3 different echo hits, and the big scythe hit will echo a big hit, and then the medium scythe hit will have a medium echo, and then the small scythe hit will have a small echo. So the scythe is just balanced the same way the other the other weapons are, with the same amount of DPS, so it's not like tripling your DPS or anything. If you read the exact wording, you might think that, but it's not the case. Then lastly, the melee tier 4 mastery perhaps doesn't play too nicely with Darox. It has a 5% chance to heal 40% of your damage dealt. There is like a theoretical max hit of something like 700 with Darox. What I'm saying is if you heal 40% of that, you're at full HP. And there's some ways to play around it, specifically like Total Recall might be an option here. Maybe a Locator Orb or a Dwarven Rock Cake or whatever. But keep that in mind. If you want to do 6-4 melee range, you should consider going Blowpipe. I know I would. This puts Tyranwin as a great area for melees because you have your best in slot armor. and it also has the blowpipe, of course. The alternative here is Desert. Desert unlocks your scythe through TOA, but also Desert has the Drygore blowpipe, and the Drygore blowpipe is more accurate, way more accurate than the regular blowpipe. That might be nice for you, so keep that in mind. Tyrannuin and Fremennik is still top DPS, but Fremennik is not required. We talked about this in the Echo item video. Fremennik is good, but not going with Fremennik will not ruin your league. So it's just a flat DPS increase. Your DPS will be high enough to do any content in the game. You'll be fine. Don't you worry. But if you want to min-max, you should go Fremennik. If you don't want to go Fremennik, you will not be ruining your league. That's the consensus here, at least for me. I'm a big fan of Varlamore, but any area will do. I covered this in the Echo item video as well. Varlamore gives good weapon progression, so I'm just a fan of Varlamore. That's it. I don't want everyone to go there, but still, it's a good area, I would say. Mauritania is also decent. It gives decent weapon progression for both melee and range, and of course has a raid, so you have your scythe available. So how do I view the melee routes as of right now? I want to say Tyrannuin Desert as your base pick. Fremennik is optional, but it's still really good for ranged through the Echo items and the Assembler, because you'll be saving on darts. And then you would still have a free pick. So Tyrannuin Desert base, Fremennik optional, free pick here. I would say going Tyrannuin, Fremennik, Mauritania is a good option. I don't think you want to go Desert, Fremennik, Mori, because you then have 2 raids, but still. You can also do like Desert, Fremennik, Varlamore. That's an option. You get an insane amount of healing through Varlamore and Desert with the blowpipe. Fremennik's just typically really good for both melee and range. So it's up to you. And Desert, of course, Drygore is more accurate than the regular blowpipe. You do not have the tier 6 ranged relic, so Desert very strong. Opens up the scythe as well. So I think if you want to go 6-4, those are your options. D-darts, Dragon darts, they drop in TOA and Vorkath mostly. There are some other sources. You should check those yourself. You will be saving 99% of your ammo if you go Fremennik. And of course, Vorkath is in Fremennik, so you got that solved already, mostly. Saving 95% only might be a mistake with a one-tick weapon. So, of course, you're not going to main hand the blowpipe. You're only going to be using it for either healing or for off styles. Or for at least styles in places where you can't use your melee attacks. But I think if you only save 95%, you might be burning through darts. So keep that in mind. Another option is 550, melee ranged. If you do this, I would consider going crossbows. Crossbows will be 2-tick here. The Bofa will be 2-tick as well. And it's really good, but it's in Tyrannuin. And Tyrannuin has the Hunleth. And the Hunleth has overhead prayers. And you will not be having tier 6. Because you have 5-5, you have 2 times attack speed on both melee and range. So it's not like Hunleth is impossible or annoying or anything. You just need to switch weapons. But I think tier 6 will be a lot easier and a lot more brain dead. So I think that's something you need to consider if you want to go 5-5-0. Crossbows would put you in Asgarnia. Not necessarily if you don't want to go ZCB, because main handing an ACB against like an RCB is not that big of a difference. However, Dragon Crossbow, ACB and ZCB do allow you to play around with Dragon Balls, so that's a thing. And of course ZCB very strong. So 5-5-0, I would say Asgarnia also has a Dog Sword available, so that's really strong too. For this build, I'm really liking Asgarnia. Fremennik is always the best, but you can consider dropping Fremennik unless you're chasing DPS, so that's a thing. That said, Assembler is also kind of nice, so I'm not too sure about this. Tyrannuin and Asgarnia base, I would say, or Asgarnia base, I should say. And then Fremennik is optional, and you would still have a free pick from here, so it's so hard to go wrong if you do this. If you go Varlamore, though, you should definitely consider Fremennik, because the Monarch Amulet and the Emperor Ring are very significant DPS increases for the Sunlight Spear. So something like Asgarnia, Fremennik, Varlamore, excellent route. Right? Tyrannuin, Fremennik, wherever you want to go, still excellent. So Dragon Bolts mostly drop in Varlamore and Fremennik and Asgarnia. There are some other sources, so you should check that on the wiki. If you want to do melee magic, you are going to end up with a 505. I think you need a Tumikin if you do this. Like anything that goes above 5 magic needs a Tumikin, in my opinion. You'll see that in the magic section of this video. Not hitting mage tier 6 is about a 10% DPS difference. So it's not that big of a deal. So 505, very viable. Fremenic is a big deal for Magic, especially if you're not going Kandarin, and Fremenic is good because it's best in slot for melee too. So Fremenic, very nice. If you do 505, I still assume your melee attack, sorry, your primary attack style is melee. If you consider Magic your primary attack style, I would just advise you to go tier 6 into Magic anyway. So assuming melee is your primary attack style, you do 505, and then you would think, I would think that you would need a raid area, so Desert, Zeya, or Mauritania, and then Fremenic because it's so strong, and then you would have a free pick. Desert gives Fang. For your free pick, I like Varlamore because it's very good for melee. It plays very nicely with Fremenic through the Sunlight Spear. Perhaps Esgarnia is an option for Torva and Dogsword. So something like Desert, Fremenic, and then Varlamore, very, very strong. Alternatively, you can go Tyrannuin because Tyrannuin is best in slot melee, and it also has the Swamp Staff, which I guess is progression for your Magic side of things. However, Swamp Staff doesn't even come close to Tumakin. So I think you should be using your melee attack style to grind out a Tumakin this way, which might be a little bit sucky because if you go grind a Tumakin, you're in for a bad time. But if you do this, you need a Tumakin. That's just my opinion. I think you absolutely want to grind out a Tumakin if you go 505. If you really do not want to go Fremenic, you can go Desert Zeya Mori, of course, as a raid area, and then Kandarin. Yes, he said it. You have Kandarin available to you. And then from there, you still have a free pick. Kandarin is a little bit awkward, but it gives Piety and Torture. I personally would not, and I repeat, do not go Kandarin just for Piety and Torture. It's not worth it. Kandarin does give Tormented bracelets and Occult, so it is like a Fremenic Light, so that's kind of okay. The Devil's Element, which is the Echo item from Kandarin, is not used much because Surges are not available without Fremenic. Of course, you can still do something like Raid Area plus Kandarin plus Fremenic, which would be very good for your Magic side of things. But still, if you don't go Fremenic and you go Kandarin instead, you have your Devil's Element, but you can't Surge because you don't have access to Wrath Runes. So I'm not really liking that. Either way, I would only really consider this if you really want Kandarin for some reason. Maybe you're looking at tasks, or you just like the area or whatever. Maybe there's some skilling that you can do there. Kandarin is an option. But if you omit Fremenic from that route, you need your Tumakin from your raid area. Before Tumakin, your Magic side of your build is going to be pretty damn bad. If for some reason you want to go 604, which I do not recommend, because I don't consider it as good, mainly because of you can get like, okay, let me rephrase everything because I'm kind of struggling here. I do not recommend 604 because 640 is stronger, because healing through ranged is better than healing through magic, and magic without the Tumakin and without tier 5 magic is not that strong. I think 640, which is the ranged option, is much stronger with a blowpipe, for instance, than 604 is with anything. But if you want to do 604, you could get your hands on Tyrannuin Swamp Staff, Mauritanian Nightmare Staves, but ultimately Tumakin will still be best in slot. It will just be a tick slower, which hurts the weapon a lot. So 604, not the best. What you can do though, with a Tumakin also, is Mage Tier 2. It reads like you can occasionally like bomb something with Tumakin, which might be interesting. So you mainly use melee, then you swap to a Tumakin, you attack something with Tumakin for plus 40% damage, and then you swap back to melee. I seriously doubt you want to do that for 8 weeks straight, but still, it's an option. If you want to do this, I don't think it's going to be too strong without proper magic gear. And if you want proper magic gear, it kind of reinforces Fremenic. So I'm not really sure how I feel about 604. It's an option. I do want to cover it in the video, but I'm not really seeing it. Either way, whatever you do, Tyrannuin plus Fremenic is insanely strong with any mastery combination. And this is the same for 604. Tacking on a raid area here for both sides of Tumakin is basically perfection. So that's good. Even though I don't like 604, it's still strong if you tack on a raid area. Chasing DPS may or may not be fun to you. So I don't know. Keep in mind, and this is something I do want to have said, let's say you really want melee tier 6, right? And for some reason you really do not like ranged. So you are thinking about going 604, and you have me saying that it's not good. Let's say you pull a Tumakin out of whatever, doesn't matter which raid. What you can do is like still blast through the Inferno with your 3-tick Tumakin. Yes, it's not a 2-tick Tumakin, but that doesn't make that much of a difference. Unless you're grinding the Inferno multiple times, like you only need 1 KC, right? So having 4 in Magic is probably enough to clear Inferno anyway. So 604 is not like incredibly bad. There's just better options for you. So that's how I feel about 604. Rangers. Range tier 6 is obviously strong with blowpipes. The blowpipe, the toxic blowpipe that is, never misses. That's super strong. People kind of shit on the Drygor now because it loses its accuracy niche. So Drygor, in case you didn't know, rolls accuracy twice, picks the highest, so it's super accurate. With range tier 6, that's useless. People like to crap on the Drygor now. I don't. I think the Drygor is still perfectly fine. So the thing with the Drygor is it kind of provides a choice between Tyrannuin and Desert. And Desert also gives you your tbow, so Desert might actually be good, even though Tyrannuin would be better. So if you want to do Chambers or TOB, of course, you should definitely consider Tyrannuin, because having 2 raids in your route, I think, is a mistake. It's a lot of content, and it's very grindy. So if you want to do Chambers, for instance, go Tyrannuin instead. That would be my advice, at least. Even if you go tier 6, you can perhaps run a crossbow, and I think crossbows are so accurate you can get away with going only tier 5. This is true for the Bofa too. Keep in mind, if you go tier 5, you do not have your tier 6 passive. So that's the thing. Tier 5 makes crossbows 2-tick, which is strong, and you, of course, perhaps do not need your the tier 6 never miss mastery, so that's because crossbows are kind of accurate already. Then you should be really careful, because echo bosses might pray overheads, and you maybe you'll miss the passive tier 6. Maybe you wish you had it. So that's a thing to consider. The best thing that you can do here is wait for streamers, specifically those that are inside of your areas, to like rush the content. You know, they're kind of battling each other to see who can get to the echo bosses the first. Maybe you're playing a little bit more casually. You can check whatever the echo bosses look like and whatever the fight looks like, and then maybe you can decide whether or not you need your passive tier 6. So ranged, pretty damn strong, tier 5 or 6 both. At the same time, if you want to main hand ranged, I don't see any real benefit from going tier 5 melee or tier 5 magic, except for tri-breeding. And if you're thinking about tri-breeding, you might be considering tier 6 ranged instead. So this is a thing of, like, this is a matter of perspective. I mentioned you can go tier 5 melee, tier 5 ranged, right? But that is only when you're main handing melee. Like if melee is your primary attack style, then tier 5 melee, tier 5 ranged is good. If you're thinking about using ranged as your primary attack style, then I would say not going tier 5 melee and just go tier 6 ranged instead, right? So it's a matter of perspective. Bofa might also not need the range tier 6 because it's super accurate, but the passive tier 6 is really nice for Gauntlet. I already said this a couple of times, but still. The tbow is another thing. It's kind of awkward. It scales off of enemy magic level. It is really strong in raids. I know I've written down probably stronger raids. No, it is really strong in raids. Not so much on most Slayer mobs. So excluding mobs like brutal black dragons, like let's say you're gonna have to kill bloodvelds or whatever, tbow not that strong. There is a little note about tbow at the end of this section. It has something to do with equipping tank armor, because the tbow suffers less from not having a lot of range strength. With the Varlamore bracers and a blowpipe, you are probably going to be healing 12 HP every 5 ticks. That is good. That is really good. 5 HP every 5 attacks. Blowpipes are 1 tick. So are knives and darts, by the way. Then So every 5 ticks, that's every 3 seconds. With the Varlamore braces, that's doubled, so you go to 10 HP, and then with the passive tier 2, you heal 20% more HP, I think. So it might stack up to 12 HP every 3 seconds. That's pretty strong. In a lot of content that requires throughput, so maybe Colosseum or Inferno, that's really, really strong. So keep that in mind. If you don't go Blowpipe and you still have like darts available to you, you might be able to utilize the healing aspect, even though your damage suffers a little bit. And then let's say you're like main handing a crossbow, you could swap to a dart main hand and then heal that way. Okay, for Rangers, I kind of see 060 as the main pick. I don't really see a lot of hybrid builds if ranging is going to be your main style. So 5-5 melee range, I mean, is already covered. 5-5 ranged magic, I don't really like. I don't see any use cases for it. If you want to do that, more power to you, but I don't really see it. I don't see much benefit either in melee tier 4 or magic tier 4, so it doesn't really matter what you do outside of 060, if that makes sense. Melee tier 4 might benefit you the most solely for melee training, but you can train your melee stats probably through Soul Wars or perhaps even Pest Control, so that's not a reason to pick it. Perhaps you can side dip into some melee echo weapons. Mainly the Dog Sword is interesting here. You will not receive full strength from them, but if you use your Dog Sword, for instance, only for speccing, that might be nice because you can still utilize the healing. So let's say you go 4-6 or maybe even 3-6 if you can't complete the Inferno. Swap out your Dog Sword, you have 100% accuracy through your passive bonuses, you smack your enemy with the Dog Sword, you spec, swap back to your whatever, your crossbow, and then you're back doing a lot of DPS, you already healed a lot, so that's really interesting, I would say. Dog Sword good, I like it. Fremenic is hard locked, in my opinion, due to range strength bonuses. The echo weapons, or items I should say, are just too strong for ranged, I think. The Assembler, stacking with the 95% ammo save, it stacks up to 99, I think. That's very nice for one-tick weapons. I think it's nicer than you think. Because if you save only 95% and you have a one-tick weapon, you might be burning through your ammo. 99%, very good. So I'm liking like Desert, Fremenic, and then maybe like a free pick, but mostly Varlamore / Asgarnia. Varlamore is kind of whack for ranged, but the reason why I'm specifically mentioning it is because with 100% accuracy, and I'm not talking about the tier 3 passive, I'm talking about the tier 6 range relic, you have 100% accuracy flat. You can range everything, including moons probably. Desana's Quiver is a small DPS increase, not incredibly small. I think it's like 4%, something like that, from the top of my head, so it's okay. You also get the Sunlit Bracers. That's really good because it opens up to like 12 healing per 5 ticks, so that's pretty damn nice. So I'm liking Varlamore. I'm also liking Asgarnia for Desert. What am I saying? Asgarnia for ZCB, and it's great in Toa. So if you go Desert, Fremenic, Asgarnia, you have your ZCB in Toa, that's pretty good. So Desert, Fremenic, and then Varlamore or Asgarnia, very good. If you don't want to go either Varlamore or Asgarnia, you can go wherever you want. So Desert, Fremenic is your base. If you are going a raid area and you're considering going ZCB as your main hand, you would be looking at it as Asgarnia, Fremenic, and then like Desert Warrior Zaya. I like that. Alternatively, you can do something like Asgarnia, Fremenic, Wilderness. However, you will not be utilizing the ZCB to its max potential, basically, because you don't have that high health targets, except for maybe Corp. Either way, you would have ZCB plus the Wilderness 1000 Dragon Ward in your offhand for quality of life. Perhaps you have a Web Weaver available, which might be interesting when speccing your enemy. Maybe we get some more relics, combat relics, so who knows how that impacts the Web Weaver, I don't know. And then if you really do not want to go Desert, you have Terranwind plus Fremenic and then Free Pick. That's really good. So that's a Desert alternative. It also gives Bofa. So main handing the Blowpipe will be a boatload of DPS. It can't miss, so you don't need your Drygore. Terranwind, Fremenic, super strong. You can go wherever. Free pick, doesn't matter. So I'm liking that. Also keep in mind, and that's where we're headed right now, because you never miss, you can literally just equip like full Justiciar and it doesn't matter. So what I did here is I had Dragon Darts in the main hand with full Justy, clocking in at 25.4 DPS against Verzik P2. If you compare that against Masori, Masori is clocking in at 27.4, and I've also included the Drygore and the regular Blowpipe just for reference, because the difference between main handing Dragon Darts and main handing the Toxic Blowpipe, which would be best in slot, the difference is about 18%. Yes, that's a lot, but at the same time, like, Dragon Darts are like, you expect them to be so much weaker than the Blowpipe, but at the same time, because you never miss, you can just equip like full tank armor and you'll be fine. So that's kind of interesting to me. Why am I showing you this? All I want to do here, and I'll do it again for the tbow, all I want to show you is that range tier 6 might open up some weird armor combinations. And you will not be suffering in DPS too much. So for instance, in TOB, it might be interesting because it allows you to tank a lot more. Who knows? I don't. Let me tell you that much. So the tbow specifically is interesting because it scales off of enemy magic level, and range strength, while relevant, is not impacting the tbow that much. So the difference between Masori, which doesn't, by the way, give that much range strength, but the difference between Masori and Justiciar is only like 5%. So this might be a thing, seeing people running around with full Justy, and I don't know. It's going to be fun at Soul Wars not being able to hit these fuckers, so that's going to be nice. Magic users. Passive tier 3 gives us 100% accuracy. This hurts magic a little bit. A little lot, actually. Without Tumican, accuracy might be an issue. I am not 100% sure if that's going to be the case, but the thing is this. I remember in Leagues 2 and in Leagues 4, because even with 100%, 175% extra accuracy, people were complaining that the Swamp Staff was like hurting a little bit against enemies like Grardor, right? Bandos in God Wars Dungeon. So if we nerf the 175% extra accuracy to 100 and you don't get a Tumican, that's going to be tough. So the Tumican triples your accuracy too, I'm pretty sure, so it's never going to miss, almost never. But without the Tumican, I think you might be in for a rough spot. So what this does is it kind of gives me the idea that Tumican is the only viable play here. And I might be wrong, but that's where my head is at the moment. You might be thinking, because Tumican, it might be a little bit difficult to get, you might be thinking, hey, I'm going to go off-style first. So let's say I'm going to go like 4 ranged, and then I'm going to kill Zuck, and then I'm going to end up 6 mage, right? That might be a play, because ranged is much more accurate, and you'll be able to kill Zuck much easier with like a rune crossbow than you will be able to do it with like a swamp staff, or whatever. Doesn't really matter which staff. But you should be careful, because you need a Zuck KC. So if you're not experienced in Inferno, and if you don't get your Zuck KC, you're going to be running around with tier 4 ranged and then tier 5 magic, and that's going to be a shame. So I'm not really sure if that's the play. I think it might be a mistake. Also, I'm pretty sure you can complete Inferno with, let's say, a Swamp Staff or whatever. Probably even worse weapons if you go like tier 6 magic anyway. So the reason why I'm saying this is because it's an option, and I think it's a bad option, so I kind of want to warn you for it. That's basically why I included this. Then, the way I interpret Mage Tier 2 is that if you switch weapons, you can come back to your magic weapon and then hit the enemy with a plus 40% magic attack. I'm not sure if that's the way it's going to work, but if that's the case, then switching to an off-style might be interesting. Therefore, I kind of predict 046 is going to be strong with the Drygore specifically. You can swap to your Drygore and heal yourself up with a 1-tick Blowpipe. That is fairly accurate. And if you do heal yourself up, you can switch back to a Tumican and then hit the enemy with a plus 40% Tumican attack. That's going to be quite nice. Even if the Mage Tier 2 doesn't work that way, healing with the Blowpipe is still strong. So the 046 is still good, even if the Mage Tier 2 doesn't work the way I expect it to work. Melee Tier 4 has a 5% chance to heal 40%. I don't think this is anywhere near consistent, so forget about it. If you're thinking about healing yourself, pick ranged. With a blowpipe, that is. Mage Tier 6 seems nice, but the damage is calculated before you hit the enemy. That might be awkward. I already talked about this. Let's say your enemy has 100 health and your max hit is 80. Your first attack is going to hit the enemy for 40 damage. Now the enemy has 60 health. You expect your second attack, because 60 is lower than 80, you expect your second attack to execute the enemy, right? This might not be the case, because in RuneScape, your damage gets rolled the moment your projectile leaves your magic stick. This is true for ranged as well, by the way. So if you roll your damage like on your second projectile, but the first projectile is still in the air, it's rolling against 100 health enemies, not 60, right? So the first attack is going to deal 40 damage, then the second attack might also deal 40, and your enemy is at 20, and you expected it to be 2-shot, and it isn't. So Mage Tier 6 might be a little bit awkward. That said, it's still going to be nice, because if you know what your max hit is and you're doing Slayer and your Slayer monsters have lower HP than your max hit, you might be one-shotting them. Also, with the Mage Tier 2, if you don't attack for a little bit, you gain like plus 40% damage. Your max hit will be higher. Let's say it is like 100 or something like that. And you're doing Slayer against mobs that have less than 100 HP, you'll be one-shotting everything. So it's still very nice, but it might be a little bit awkward to play with. Anyway, recapping magic. I feel Mage Masteries kind of solidifies Tumakan as our best magic weapon. And that might be a trap. That's dangerous, because if you go dry into Tumakan, you're setting yourself up for a horrible time in leagues, and that would be a shame, because leagues is supposed to be fun. So magic is for the grindy people. If you do this and you still like you're thinking about it, but you're not sure if you want to grind super hard, or you might think that you're susceptible to being a little bit bummed out if you go a little bit dry, weapon progression is key. So I'm gonna say it, you should consider going Kandarin. My previous videos were probably wrong when it came to stacking magic damage for Tumakan. I talked about the Tumakan having a magic damage cap of 26%. This is probably false. Someone in the comments told me about this. I rechecked it myself. I reread the wording specifically, and I also checked it on Gearscape. I think I'm wrong. I think the cap is actually 33.33 repeating percent. That's a cap you cannot hit with no combination of gear. So that basically means there is no cap, and stacking magic damage is best for DPS. This makes Fremennik, Kandarin, and Zeah the best route. Period. However, if you don't want to go Zeah, you can swap Zeah for Mauritania or Desert. I think you do need a Tumakan, so it's a raid area for you. I think the Desert specifically is kind of nice for Drygore. Yes, you'll be leaving Ancestral on the table, but at the same time, Ancestral is like a 3% upgrade over Verdus, and then, yes, that is 9% with the Tumakan, but at the same time, you're getting Drygore, and if you go like 046, the Drygore is extremely nice for healing. So, might be an option for you. I also know a lot of people do not like Kandarin, and not going Kandarin means you're going to be missing out on surges. You need both Kandarin and Fremennik for surging, so keep that in mind. But if you don't want to go Kandarin, you will not be using surges, and that kind of means there is a gap between your Tumakan and your second best magic weapon. That's important, because your second best magic weapon, outside of surging with the Devil's Element, is going to be significantly lower DPS than Tumakan. You need your Tumakan if you do this. Let's say you go Kandarin and Fremennik, you get your Devil's Element, and you unlock Wrath Runes, and you don't get your Tumakan because you go a little bit dry on it, and you burn out of Toa or whatever. You still have your Devil's Element. You'll be doing exceptional DPS in most areas, especially those that have elemental weaknesses, and sometimes even surpassing the Tumakan. So Kandarin is still kind of a point of interest, in my opinion, or an area of interest. If you really do not want to go Kandarin, you'll be leaving Tormented Bracelets on the table. You can go Wilderness or Asgarnia for a very low magic damage % increase in the God Cape or the Eternal Boots. It's an option. It's not bad, it's not good either. Alternatively, you can consider going Tyrannwyn. Tyrannwyn has the Blowpipe for the ranged tier 4 healing. I keep talking about the Blowpipe and ranged tier 4 healing. I realized that darts and knives are an option too. Knives drop only in Zeah, I believe. Darts are a little bit more readily available. They're all going to be one tick. Yes, they're not going to be that accurate, but especially on lower armored targets, you can still heal yourself up with just darts. So Blowpipe is not that big of a deal, but it's an option. Tyrannwyn also has the Swamp Staff, which kind of acts as a magic progression weapon, but still Swamp Staff is nowhere near as strong as Tumakin. So let's say you go dry in Tumakin, you only have your Swamp Staff, you're going to be okay, but it's going to be a huge DPS difference, like almost 50, I believe, on most targets. Blowpipe from Tyrannwyn allows you to drop Desert for a preferred raid. This is important. If you do not want to go Desert, you can consider going something like Fremennik Tyrannwyn and then Tyrannwyn Fremennik and then Zeah or Mori, if that's where your preferences lie. So this is how I view magic. So we've covered melee, ranged, and magic this way. For all masteries, Tyrannwyn and Fremennik are kind of solidified right now. Unless Jagex throws us another curveball, I think Tyrannwyn and Fremennik are probably going to be best in slot for most styles, including most mastery combinations. The range tier 3 is really strong. Keep a look out for range tier 3 because of blowpipes and darts. Specifically, the Drygor here pulls ahead significantly because it's very strong on armor targets as well. The darts, for instance, are not that great on lower HP mobs, but let's say you were thinking about going Total Recall because it's really good in Slayer. You can keep your health up without eating supplies. Let's say you have your range tier 3 unlocked, you have your melee tier 6 or your magic tier 6. Just swap to darts. You'll be fine. You can heal yourself up, then swap back to your main style and kill the Slayer mobs again. So that's an option. Ranged gained a significant buff, which I think it needed. I thought ranged was kind of whack before Masteries. Now I think it is quite nice. Although it's very one-tick weapon heavy, blowpipe specifically. So I'm not really liking that. Crossbow's still great, by the way. Don't get me wrong. Crossbows are insane still. So going ranged crossbow, very nice. Personally, I'm not really a fan of blowpipes. So if I were to go ranged, I would definitely consider going crossbows, specifically Asgarnia. And that's basically where my head is at right now. I'll cover that in a second. So my perspective generally remains unchanged. It does hurt my original plan a little bit. So any melee combination that did not plan on going to Tyrannwyn or Desert gets hurt by any sort of 6-3-0 plan, as you will not have a one-tick blowpipe. And specifically the Drygor seems very sexy for off-styles. That said, the magic and melee tier 4 also heal you, I believe. I know melee for a fact. I need to look that up real quick. One sec. Back. There we go. Sorry about that. Melee hits have a 5% chance to heal you. And magic, when you roll above 90% of your max hit with magic, you heal 10% too. So let's go back. Oh my god. No, not like this. I'm messing up. Anyway, where was I? So I was thinking like going 6-3-0 and then heal back up with a blowpipe. I think if you're like, with most content, healing like for 5% chance to heal like 40% of the damage you do with melee, you'll be fine. You don't need the heals. I think like 6-4-0 is not that big of a deal that way. So don't stare yourself blind on going the blowpipe with any 6-3-0 build, right? So yes, the Drygor is strong. Yes, it's very good for healing. At the same time, does it really matter that much? I don't think so. I really don't. So crossbows still work fine for content like the Inferno, but the range tier 4 doesn't benefit crossbows that much. So if you go like 6-4, crossbows aren't that strong. Perhaps you can switch to knives or darts for healing. I already mentioned this. Drygor accuracy helps a lot, but at the same time, do you really need a lot of healing in most content? I doubt it. Especially if you run Banker's Note, like you can just like unnote some sharks and some karamguams, you know, tiki, whatever. Anyway, with all that in mind, I am kind of strongly considering a 5-5-0 build with Varlamore as Garnier Fremenic. If I can dodge all overheads, and I think I will, Varlamore as Garnier Fremenic, it really depends on the echo bosses, but that's where my head is at right now. I can do Sunlight Spear. First of all, I benefit from all the melee progression gear that's in Varlamore. Then ultimately, hopefully, I can get my hands on the Sunlight Spear. I can get my hands on the Dog Sword. I can get my hands on the ZCB, and because I have tier 5 ranged, this will be a 2-tick weapon, very strong. Soul Reaper Axe, very strong too, especially for like less intense AFK, semi-AFK Slayer grinds. Then Assembler from Fremenic, which might be interesting if I use my ZCB a lot with Dragon Bolts. And then Emperor Monarch Ring, very good for both ranged and melee, but also very good for Sunlight Spear, because it has prayer bonuses and melee offensive stats, so that's really good, and I'm liking that. But this will completely depend on how much of a pain in the ass the echo bosses are going to be, specifically like talking about the overheads that they're going to pray against. Because I go 5-5-0, I do have switches, but let's say for some messed up reason Jagex makes them only susceptible to magic attacks, this build doesn't fly, right? I'm still considering building around the Kopesh. I'll wait for all relics to be released. I don't want to spend any more time and energy on like theory crafting a Kopesh build right now. I will do so when everything is released. Thank you for watching. It's been a long video again. Hopefully you enjoyed. I hope I covered everything. If I did, I will not be remaking this video. If I didn't, I will. So if there is like pretty like damning relic releases that are coming our way and they throw us a bunch of curveballs, lots of stuff changes again, you can expect another video covering everything. All right? Again, thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye-bye.